This is the Overton Pod. I'm being inclusive today. Hello, Kanthan.
Good morning, John.
I think it's important we be inclusive because, as John Steenhuisen says to the Black Business Council, a very inclusive organization which excludes all people who aren't black, that they obviously are helping with inclusive growth.
Absolutely. And I wonder whether he paid the 50,000 Rand a year membership fee to get him to speak to them.
I can tell you where my money is. But yeah, all right. So enough DA silliness. Well, maybe we'll get back to DA silliness, but we get to start the week off with that. It's quite funny. We did get to do that almost every week now. Some sort of stupidity from the DA members. Maybe we should talk quickly about the fact that our friend, Ramon Caberna, has finally been dismissed, terminated, fired, whatever you want to call it, from his position as chief of staff for said minister, John Steenhuisen. And that was done not on the last day of the month, not on the first day of the month, but on what happened to be the second day of the month and also his birthday. The second work day of the month. It wasn't the second day of the month at all. So they waited until Ramon's birthday to terminate him. Very nice people. What do you think about that?
Look, clearly there's going to be a process that plays itself out in terms of the legalities. And, given the fact that both you and I are, I'm, certainly close friends with Ramon. And so I certainly wouldn't want to in any way say anything that's going to impede his ability to get the best possible outcome in the labor court. But wearing my hat as a person who has had 29 appearances before the CCMA in my capacity as an employer at various places, of which I have lost 2.
Yeah.
I'm very clear from my side that if there's a classic case of unfair dismissal that's about to play itself out, we're about to see it happen. And I would also like to remind everyone that the CCMA, like a court of law, is open to public scrutiny. And I do urge everyone at the point at which it either ends up in the CCMA or the Labour Court to go to that venue and to ensure that they are getting firsthand what is being recounted. Because let's be very clear, the mainstream media is never going to report on it.
Well, the mainstream media has in fact reported that Ramon was let go, terminated, for not getting security clearance. I will be like you, knowing some more detail on this particular thing. But all I will say is those facts are incorrect.
Absolutely.
Journalists, of course, didn't bother to do a bit more research. They wouldn't need to know Ramon. They wouldn't need John Steenhuisen to tell the truth. They could just go and do a little bit of research about how people are employed in state, how job offers are made, when those things are made public, when those people are allowed into the office, when you get a literal tag that lets you into the union buildings, those types of things.
Yes. Interestingly, they seem to have forgotten all of that.
Yes.
And I think it's what's going to be particularly interesting in terms of how this case plays itself out is that we had this landmark case fairly recently with regards to the question of dual citizenship.
Yeah, well, yes, we did. We had a. Well, that's so. Just the connection you're making, just to finish off on that point, which is that if the journalists did a little bit more research, they'd realize that the line John is spinning currently, which is, I asked Ramon to leave because I wanted him to leave. It's a political appointment, so you should be able to just leave from a political appointment. It's not like a real job. That's, again, I'm not going to divulge too much details, but of course is, in my opinion, John outright lying about what the situation was and, in fact, what that appointment is. But over and above that, you're talking with regards to security clearance, the claim would now be that Ramon is both a South African citizen and also has a French nationality as well. And therefore, he is a dual citizen and so can't pass some sort of vetting, which will be a problem for a lot of DA members, I might add.
Well, it's also going to be a problem for lots of ANC members, because remember that lots of ANC members were born in exile.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and certainly there's a dual citizenship component that comes in as a result.
But the Constitutional Court, as you mentioned, has ruled that you cannot deny someone basically citizenship, nationality as a South African by the principle
of them having citizenship of another country. Quite right.
Correct.
And, more to the point, we also have the Constitution, which says no South African may be deprived of his or her citizenship.
Yeah.
As kind of a cornerstone. But, I use myself as an example. My oldest daughter was born in Italy and remember, I fled the country in 86 with the state of emergency because security police were knocking on my door.
Yeah.
And she's a dual citizen. She has a UK passport as well as a South African passport, which is why she is very happily working in the UK right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not hopping across to visit her because I refuse to pay the British government outrageous amounts of money for a short-term visa. But that's a story for another day.
It is a story for another day. Let's leave that aside for now. So interesting. I think that will certainly, as you say, I've also had dealings with CCMA and Labour dealings on both sides of this, employer, employee, etc. I very much feel that Ramon not only has a solid case, but that the law, which I actually don't agree with, but the law will fall on his side of things.
Correct.
And
my advice to the DA really is, and it is advice to the DA because ultimately they need to be calling Steenhuisen to order, is pay the man out for the duration of his contract and don't let it go to court. Because the last thing you want is for every single person in the chain of command to be subpoenaed to the High Court to give testimony as to what the process was that led to eventually him being dismissed on a pretext when the original premise under which Steenhuisen wanted to dismiss him was judging him in the court of public opinion.
Yeah. Good. All right, let's leave that there. And I just want to wish Ramon all the best. And I will also point to his YouTube channel, Undercurrents, where he does interviews with various interesting people. And go support him there. And in anything else he does. Good guy. Got his head screwed on straight and been done over by a political party.
Just try and persuade him to not buy a 2012 Range Rover. It's a bad choice.
Ramon, buy an L322, one of the greatest cars ever made. It will hurt your bank account, but you will be happy. Right, let's get on with things, Kanthan. So, wow, where do we begin? There's quite a bit happening at the moment. Do you want to go straight into the story of the moment, the hour?
I think there's very interesting things that have played themselves out in the past 24 hours. And, most critically is the fact that the price of my Tesla shares kind of plummeted quite catastrophically over the past
you poor baby.
28 hours. I must declare up front that even though they have plummeted, I'm still ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay, because I bought...
You bought early.
I bought relatively early, so I'm 1.5% ahead of where I bought. But I'm very comfortable with that. I'm holding Tesla for the long term. I'm convinced that if Musk continues on his current trajectory, Tesla is eventually going to be a multi-trillion company, and I'm very happy to hold out until such time as it gets to that point. But the reason why is because people have taken great pleasure in the fact that there is a very public spat between the President of the United States and Elon Musk.
All right, let's do some background on how we got here, because what's been going on, I think everyone is obviously up to speed on Elon Musk and DOGE, which both you and I have been very excited about. And it has been quite unfortunate to see what's happened with DOGE in terms of those cuts not being codified. So the big argument was, if you recall it all, the big argument was that Trump came in and appointed Elon, for a limited period, by the way. I will just point out that when Elon left 10 days ago, whatever it was, that had always been planned, because you can only be appointed as a temporary government worker for 130 days or something to that effect. Okay,
correct. Yes, but
it can be renewed.
But also appointing someone as a temporary government worker means that you don't have to go through the process of getting the Senate to approve,
vetting them, and all the rest
and
of
vetting them. So, although in terms of vetting, let's point out, Musk already had a top secret clearance.
Yes, because he builds rockets.
From the time of the Obama administration.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's got nothing to do with any relationship he might have with Trump.
But I think it's been disappointing that, the way DOGE worked was they sent people into each of the departments in government. And those people then found wastage and wasteful expenditure. And they would then report that wasteful expenditure to whoever was actually in charge. So let's take USAID, for example. The wasteful expenditure...
USAID, please, not USAID.
USAID. Let's take USAID as the example. That was reported to Marco Rubio. We are spending this much on USAID per year. It's wasteful expenditure for the following reasons, because we're funding flavored condoms in Mozambique or whatever it is. And then Marco Rubio, as the Senate-approved head of that department, the cabinet secretary, gets to turn around and go, we're keeping it or we're getting rid of it. And he got rid of it. And that's how this was meant to work. Now, some of the expenditure runs through Congress because it all works on appropriations, which is basically how the government chooses how they will waste the money that they have stolen from you in taxes. And a lot of this needed to go back to Congress. So DOGE finds the wastage, and then that needs to be referred back to Congress, even by some cabinet secretaries, to say, look, we need you to not appropriate this money for this purpose anymore. We need you to cut these projects or these programs, etc. That hasn't happened. That's for a large part. I think in what's called the Big Beautiful Bill, I think that there is something in the region of $70 billion or something like that in terms of wastage being cut, but nowhere near the 1 trillion that Musk promised. I don't think it was ever going to be there right now. Still early days, but I think they could have probably cut at least $250 billion, and they've chosen not to. So that was the start of the issue. Then Musk has personal issues with the bill because the bill increases the debt ceiling. In other words, the amount of money the government can borrow before they have to stop borrowing and ask for special permission to continue or shut down, as America has had multiple government shutdowns. And there's a number of other things. So there's tax cuts in there. I personally, on the bill, we can get into the details, and I've looked at the actual details. I think a lot of the information online is incorrect. It's very partisan.
So let me cut to the chase on the core issue that's at stake here, because this really revolves around one particular thing in terms of where Trump is right now, just barely 100 days into his presidency, and needing to get a budget bill that's actually passed that's going to keep the country running.
Yeah.
The fundamental problem that Trump is dealing with is that in 2017, when he came to office, he passed a range of tax cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And those tax cuts were great for the American economy.
Yeah.
They kickstarted the economy under Trump, and those tax cuts benefited middle class and working class Americans overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
However, those tax cuts, the 2017
were going to expire,
have an expiry date, and those tax cuts are due to expire. And what that means is that for working class Americans and for middle class Americans, the expiry of those tax cuts is going to mean an overall impact of potentially up to an 85% increase in the taxes that they pay.
Yeah.
Which, by every measurable standard is a lot.
Yeah.
And Trump, at this particular stage right now, desperately needs to get those tax cuts codified into law so that they do not go away. Because the last thing he wants to do is to start his presidency with people having a tax increase.
Correct, because he would lose the midterms.
So Well, not necessarily, because the midterms are the end of next year.
You would still lose the midterms if you increase people's taxes.
Yeah. So, and the critical thing right now is to understand that the Republicans, in terms of Congress, they literally have a one vote majority in Congress in order to get any bills passed. So right now, that means that every person in terms of the Republican Party who is currently sitting in Congress, and remember that only about half of those are actually people who support Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The rest of them are what Trump used to scathingly refer to as rhinos, Republicans in name only, because they basically claim to be Republicans but follow an overwhelmingly...
Can I stop you for a second? Oh, sorry, I know it's mid-thought, but it's 53-47. So are you minusing...
I'm minusing those who are currently not able to vote, but effectively you've got a one-vote majority that was necessary for passing the big, beautiful bill.
Okay. In terms of who's known, who it's known who's going to vote against, etc.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, I got you.
Right.
Got you.
So that's where we are right now, and it effectively squeaked through with one vote, and the reason for that is that the way in which these congressional districts actually
But
operate,
it hasn't gone through yet, Senate.
Well, it hasn't gone through. But the starting point, remember that what happens is that the bill first gets drafted by Congress. Congress fleshes it out. They do lots of last-minute horse trading.
Yeah.
And then the bill gets sent to the Senate for ratification.
Sure.
The Senate then kicks it back and forth, makes a couple of changes, sends it back to Congress. And eventually, at the point at which you've got both the Senate and Congress saying we've agreed upon a bill, it then goes to the president of the country for ratification.
Yeah.
So that's a situation that we've had up until now. The problem is that at the very last minute, what happened in terms of Congress is that they put through lots of stuff that was literally crammed in at the last minute, but more to the point, it was crammed in violation of congressional rules, which required that people be given the opportunity to be able to actually go through this stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with you because there's another rule. Now, you may disagree with this rule. You may think the rule's bullshit, but there's another rule called the management rule.
Yes.
Okay, and the management rule says that the people who are in charge, i.e. the speaker, can look at a bill in the last minute and can make small changes to that bill.
John, you're absolutely
under
right.
management rules.
John, you're absolutely right.
And that's what happened.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's what.
But Musk doesn't like that.
Yeah, but not only does Musk not like it, but nearly all of the Trump Republicans do not like it, because it's stuff that was basically inserted at the last minute. More to the point, it meant that Congress did not have the opportunity to actually go through those changes and make any comment on it. But the overall impact of it is that in exchange for codifying Trump's tax cuts, there's an increase in overall government spending that gets kicked in automatically as a result. And Musk, is basically a purist, because he said, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up to clean up the waste, fraud, and abuse through DOGE. And it was the duty of Congress to then ensure that we are not increasing the national debt, and more to the point, that we start decreasing the national debt.
Sorry, Kanthan, you said Musk is a purist.
Yes.
Okay. So I must understand that Musk truly believes what's going to happen is that a few hundred members of Congress and 53 senators who don't agree on much, all of these people have major disagreements on things, don't agree with their own president. So now there's three factors here that you have to take into account. There's three different variations of things that may happen. The president has one position, okay? All the people in Congress have potentially hundreds, thousands, even millions of different positions.
Yes.
And the same applies to those members of Senate. Elon Musk comes along, been around government and politicians for 11 months now.
Yes.
And decides, because he's a purist, of course, because he's a purist. I'm not calling this a purist. He would like them to just do exactly what he wants, the way he wants it, the way it should be. I'm sorry. Has he heard of something called politics?
absolutely certain he has heard of something called politics, and
But he's too autistic to understand how it works.
he's rewriting the rules of politics. And
He's not rewriting shit.
And I'll tell you how he's rewriting it. Okay.
Yeah,
So let's just talk about this. The way in which he's rewriting it. So right now, consider Trump's position. All right. Trump is fully aware of the fact that right now, his ability to successfully carry out the rest of his presidency hinges on one specific thing, and that is ensuring that his tax cuts from 2017 get codified. It really is that fundamental.
Well, there's three major things here.
Let me just finish this
Yeah.
thought process, and then we can interrogate it.
Okay.
So the last thing that Trump can afford at this point is to have a situation where if he is now calling Congress to order and he says, I am not going to sign off any bill until such time as you guys cut back on all of this stuff. Congress refuses to do so. His tax cuts then expire, and immediately he's on the douang in terms of his popularity. So that's the fundamental problem that he has. Musk, on the other hand, is saying that if you proceed down this route, effectively what we are doing is we are falling upon same old, which is what we've always had, where Congress is able to effectively undermine the role of the president and the mandate of the president simply because of the fact that the president is not able to call enough of them to order. And so at that level, that's why I'm saying that he's being a purist, because he's not trying to say my way. He's saying, I want the president to do what he promised to do. And everything that he's saying so far relates to calling up Donald Trump's previous policy positions and emphasizing those. He says, I want this thing which was promised. He's not saying my way or the highway. He's saying these are the things under which the president said that he was going to get into office.
Are you finished?
Now you go.
Because that's a whole bunch of bullshit. Okay, and I'm gonna.
No.
I tell you why.
No. Hang on. If we're going to be talking about this stuff, we're going to use proper terms. Okay, you're dismissing
bullshit's a fair term.
No. Dismissing stuff as bullshit. No. By all means, interrogate my arguments.
Sure.
Okay, but do so on the basis of fact and not on the basis of pejoratives.
Jeez, my phone is ringing off the hook today. All right, so it's not pejorative. I know you take it as pejorative and it sounds bad. Okay, so everything
in the context, it doesn't help people who are listening to us.
Everything you've said is wrong. Another word for bullshit, and I'm going to say why.
Tell me why.
And I'm going to
it's
say
wrong.
why now. Okay, Elon Musk isn't supporting. If the argument here, and I suppose we should get into the actual fallout that's happened, but fine, let's discuss where the disagreement is on this bill. If the argument is here, Elon Musk, so I don't think Elon Musk is rewriting anything. I don't believe what happened in the last 24 hours is that the world's richest man and the world's most powerful man had a falling out, allegedly. I'll get to that later. And
I didn't know that Elon had a falling out with Xi Jinping, but let's talk.
So that happened. And allegedly, again, and the point is that Elon is learning that his distance from power is actually far greater than he thinks it is. Elon, I like Elon in many ways. I think he's a brilliant mind. I think he's done amazing things. But Elon is not powerful. It's simple as that. Let me explain what's going to happen in the next week. If this is all legitimate and he's decided screw Donald Trump's still going to be the president. People are still going to respond to Donald Trump's wishes. His whole administration is. J.D. Vance is still going to toe the Donald Trump line, as is the whole of Congress for the most part, as is the Senate for the most part, as is the Supreme Court for the most part. When someone drops out of the Supreme Court, it'll be Donald Trump who decides who's going to fill that post. Elon Musk will have nothing to do with it. If Elon Musk wants to have power in terms of politics, then he needs to exert power in terms of politics. He needs to do what George Soros has done. Okay, he's not rewriting anything, in my opinion, and I can't see him rewriting anything. Now, in terms of the claim that he is trying to, in this this fight over this bill. In terms of the claim, hold on, let me finish.
You're taking this very personally.
In terms of the claim,
I'm very curious about this.
Getting passionate is not the same as taking things personally. So,
oh, really?
So
it's literally the definition.
What?
You can't be passionate without it being personal.
That's not true.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely not true. I'm passionate about film, for example. I could argue with you about a movie. It's nothing personal.
That's a personal stake.
Nah, it's not a
definition.
I have no personal stake.
Passion's an emotional response.
There's
nothing that gets codified in terms of law around passions. No, but anyway, go on with your passionate outburst.
Anything. Just so we've got that clear. Anything you're passionate about, anything where you're willing to get into an argument over, is personal. That can't be the case, Kanthan. Anyway, all right, I'll carry on. So let me finish on the claim that that what Elon is really doing here is he's trying to push forward Donald Trump's agenda. The bill is what pushes forward Donald Trump's agenda. Donald Trump promised on the campaign trail a couple of very key issues. Key issue number one was securing the border. That was Donald Trump's biggest issue. He was shot in the head while pushing forward that issue. He claims that a graph showing illegal immigration during the Biden administration was what saved his life. That was Donald Trump's key issue during the campaign. All right? The second big issue that he campaigned on was making sure that he brought the American economy back, and several of the ways he intended to do that was maintaining the tax cuts you spoke about, increasing tax cuts for things like tax on tips. If you remember, Kamala Harris copied him about 6 weeks after he released that policy as his campaign. And then one of the other things he campaigned on, which was a big thing he campaigned on, there were four. So one of the other things that he campaigned on was making the military strong again and powerful and a fighting force. And the last thing would be generally grouped into culture wars, but the main one there was keeping men out of women's sports, women's bathrooms, etc., the transgender issue. Those were his big campaign promises, although he had several. There were those, if anyone chooses to recall, there were those videos recorded in Mar-a-Lago with the sort of fireplace in the background and the flag, and Trump recorded those, I think, a year and a half before the election, laying out his entire plan for his campaign. I might add, when he recorded those, Elon Musk was a supporter of Joseph Biden. He had supported Joe Biden for the Democratic primary. Okay, that's where we were when Donald Trump recorded what his campaign promises were and put them out in several videos across the internet. Now, the bill does three main things. The bill secures the border. In other words, it does that by giving funding, permanent funding, not only to ICE, not only to Border Patrol, but also to build the wall in finality now. Done, dusted. Then it also ensures that they can deport more people, because Tom Homan, who has been in charge of that process, has turned around and said, I cannot do this at the pace you want me to do it without more money. Okay, so that's another campaign promise of Donald Trump's. It solidifies those tax cuts, which you've spoken about, but it also adds on no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. So if you work harder, you benefit by working harder because your overtime is not taxed. Okay, now, I'm sure there's loopholes around that, because as an employer, I'd just employ you for 2 hours and then obviously you could work overtime for 10. But so I'm not sure how they're going to police that. But the point is that's the stuff that's in that bill. All right? And then there's $1 trillion to the United States military, to the Department of Defense, which is a ridiculous amount of money. And I'm willing to have the discussion about whether that's necessary. But that's what's in the bill. And then there's obviously a whole bunch of other stuff, which is just part of running the government. And the reason is that this has happened in that bill is because the way this is working, they only need 50 votes in the Senate, which you mentioned. If they do it through a different process, separate the bills out,
so
they need 60.
Yes, so the reason why that's the case is because if they do it this way, it ends up being a reconciliation bill.
Correct.
Rather than So if it's a bill that actually gets tabled before the Senate, it needs to go through 60 votes, which means that the Democrats are able to filibuster and block it, which they're able to do. Now, here's a point that you're completely missing. Okay. If I were in Trump's position,
Sure.
would I be doing exactly the same thing as Trump is doing? The answer is yes. For all of the reasons that you've outlined. Because he is stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of the way in which those numbers have actually fallen.
Okay.
So, and everything that you say in terms of Trump's campaign promises, yes, the additional military spend and so forth, yes, that's all 100% in terms
Okay,
of
so
what,
where are we not lining up?
okay, we're not lining up in terms of what is actually going on behind the scenes here right now. And what is going on behind the scenes here right now is that you've got a window of opportunity between when this eventually gets solved, and it will be solved. Okay, but
What's this that's solving?
okay.
What is the problem? Sorry.
No, the entire process of getting the bill finalized by the Senate.
Okay.
Okay. So before the entire process actually goes to pass, if you look in terms of what the markets were saying around the probability of the bill getting passed by the Senate,
Yes.
okay, there was a 75% probability, which dropped yesterday to a 50% probability that the Senate is going to pass the bill in its current form. And what is going to be the outcome of this is that, as a direct result of this, the Senate is going to send further points of reconciliation back to Congress. Congress is going to have to apply its mind to that again. And there will be something that eventually ends up being sent from Congress back to the Senate that is going to end up getting this bill passed, but it is going to be on far more favorable terms to Trump's overall agenda than it is right now. So that's my read on where this is actually going.
All right.
And I'm saying that this is not about Elon trying to run government. It is all about the fact that Trump cannot be picking fights right now with Congress and with the Senate, but Elon can.
Okay, so you're going, can I just see if I've got this correct? You're going, this is a little bit psyop in that Elon is not actually gunning for Trump. And I do want to talk about the actual posts that were put on X. Elon is not actually gunning for Trump. Elon is gunning for the bill to change.
Yes.
And is actually helping Trump, knowingly or unknowingly. I don't know if they've discussed it or if he's just decided this is the best way to achieve this. And that's what's actually going on here behind the scenes.
I am saying that Elon is trying to influence the bill to a different shape. Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Look, he has openly said he wants the bill killed completely.
Yes. But again, that's straight out of Trump's playbook, which is, Trump goes in with guns blazing. And he says we're going to have 120% tariffs and eventually settles at 30%. This is straight out of Trump's playbook.
Okay. So when I saw all of what happened, so this gets us into the actual what happened. We've discussed the meat of the bill and how we got here.
I'm just there for the memes, Sean. I mean, the memes are wonderful,
Yes, I agree. The memes have been spectacular. I saw a great one. It was Trump putting a bumper sticker on a Tesla, and it says, "I bought this before Elon went insane." Great. I mean, that's just fantastic. When I saw this, my instinct was to say, I don't have enough information. There's not enough. Everyone's freaking out. So this happens. We're recording this podcast within kind of 15, 16 hours of all of those tweets going out yesterday. So it's not even 24 hours, really. And I looked at this and said, I don't have enough. And obviously there were people freaked out, and the real grifters online already sort of split themselves into, I support Musk and I support Trump. And I mean, okay, you can do that if you want. I mean, I could split myself right now in terms of if I had to choose who I'm choosing, but I don't really see a purpose to that. The grifters are going to be very sad if in 3 weeks' time, Trump and Elon kiss and make up, because they're going to, I mean, I've seen some people online posting things like, immediately turning on Trump, for example, and posting very derogatory things. Now, Elon will be able to take it back, maybe. The grifters won't. It's going to be very, very difficult to do that. And so and I'm sure there's been grifters on the Trump side as well. I just don't think there's enough information. I just don't think we know enough here. Like it's obviously a very public breakup. It seems a bit weird because it's an odd thing for the two men to do. If it's completely real and there's nothing manufactured here, and in fact, Elon's not 3D chessing a bit, as you're saying, he might achieve some 3D chess, but he's not trying to necessarily. He literally is angry with Trump. And he's pissed off with Trump, and he's willing to make this sort of hard break. He posted a video last night. Scott Adams was talking to someone. I don't know who the person he was talking to, but that person was making the point that when Bill Gates said to Elon that he had shorted Tesla, Elon turned around to him and said, "Why?" And Bill couldn't give him an answer. And he's like, "Bill, you've got enough money. Like, you don't need to short Tesla." Bill basically said, "Well, I think it's a good position to take." And Elon said, "But to make money, like what? But you don't need money. You don't need to make more money. Like, there's no reason to short Tesla. You believe in the environment. You believe in climate change. You believe in electric vehicles. Why would you short Tesla, like, to make more money if money's not what you need and you're allegedly trying to change the world?" So on all those issues. And Elon posted that, I think, to kind of say, well, and the guy in the video was saying, when Elon draws a line with someone, that's it, he's done. And maybe he is done. Maybe he's doing the same thing with Trump. Maybe that is actually what's going on. Again, I don't have enough information to know whether this is a psyop.
Which is why, I refuse to get drawn into the personal.
There's one personal thing we got to talk about.
And the one personal thing is the Epstein thing.
We got to talk about it.
All right. Okay, we can get to the Epstein thing at one point. But basically, from my perspective right now, if Elon is able to go on the offensive against the bill, and if he threatens in his personal capacity, okay, not in it's a different thing when he was part of the Trump administration. But now in his personal capacity, if he threatens to back every candidate that or to back opposition to every candidate that doesn't actually play by the rules of what Trump had promised in the first place, he can do that. Trump cannot do that.
Agreed.
Okay. Right.
Although if you listen to the likes of Mark Halperin, a Democrat, but old school Democrat, has a good show on YouTube, podcast, etc. Anyway, if you listen to someone like him, he will tell you that he doesn't believe if Elon goes up against Trump, he doesn't believe Elon wins.
But it depends on what your definition is. You see, your definition of winning is what matters. Okay,
so let me explain what the definition was in that instance. The definition was if Elon supports a candidate and Trump supports a candidate, Elon will lose. That's what he said.
I agree with that.
He said based on the history.
I agree with that. But you see, the question really is going to be whether. So, as a very good example, let's take the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, right now Trump is dependent on Mike Johnson. Is Trump likely to turn around and say Mike Johnson needs to be primaried?
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely. But is Trump likely to say, I'm going to support Mike Johnson's rerun for Congress? Again, my answer is unlikely.
Why?
Because he would rather have someone else in rather than Johnson, because Johnson has been playing both sides and consistently.
I think Johnson, personally, I think that's a very difficult job. I don't like the job Johnson's done. If it was me, in terms of if I was an American and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at what Johnson's done, I wouldn't be happy. But I also acknowledge that is an incredibly difficult position to hold in the American legal political system.
So let's say that you and I agree on that, and
I think in that context he's done well.
But I'm using Johnson as a very specific example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You can understand why strategically it would be very difficult, even on the assumption that Trump disapproves of the job that Johnson is doing, for him to primary Johnson.
Yes, I think he won't primary.
But I'm going back to the core point of what we're talking about, which is it's difficult for Trump to primary the few allies that he has right now that are actually tipping the balance of power. And I was just going through the numbers. It was the big beautiful bill passed by 215 votes to 214 against.
Yeah.
Right. So it was literally that one vote margin. And, on the assumption that there's a couple of people who, on that 215, who are there simply because of the fact that their pork barrel politics came through in terms of the big, beautiful bill at the last minute. And is Trump likely to go after them? No. But is there a possibility that Musk, private citizen Musk, is in a position to go after those people that have taken advantage of this opportunity? And look, you say it's politics. You're absolutely right. It is politics. But they have seen there's an opportunity here to get stuff into the bill simply based on the fact that they know that Trump desperately needs to get this bill passed. So is there a possibility that private citizen Musk will go after those people and put money against whoever is opposing them? I think there's a very strong possibility.
I agree with that. I just don't think it's as 3D chessy. So I think
no, I'm not suggesting. Going back to what I said about him being a purist, he puts money behind stuff that he believes in. And remember, this is a guy who goes and crashes on friends' couches.
I agree, but he also, if you've read the biographies, if you've read the stories on Musk, the positive and the negative. Whether you view this as a positive or a negative, that's on you. Musk gets his own way or he disengages. So if he's your boss and you don't do it his way or the way he wants it, you're fired. He doesn't ask you to try again. He doesn't give you a second. You're fired. If he says something at a board meeting and someone puts up their hand and says that's not possible, you're fired. Okay. If he goes to a company, he says, I want you to buy you for this amount. And they say, no, we want that. He goes, no, thank you.
And
I no longer want you.
For sure.
Okay. So,
but none of what you're saying contradicts what I'm saying.
Okay. What I'm getting at is that I'm not sure it's as long game as I do believe he will fund people to primary people he doesn't like. I think that will happen because he is a bit childish in the way he views the world. And Donald Trump is like this too, by the way. He's vindictive. So he will remember that you slighted him. He wants the world to be this way in your purest definition. You went against him in wanting the world to be purist. And so if he believes enough in the issue, he will go after you down the line. But I don't think in the moment Elon Musk is thinking some of this shit through. And I will bring an example from the moment to prove that. Yesterday, as part of all the fighting, Trump turned around and said, well, if we really wanted to save money from the bill. Now, Trump wasn't saying he was going to do this. If you read the words, he said, if we really wanted to save money, we would just take all the subsidies we give to Elon Musk and all his companies away. And that would save us billions.
No, it wasn't subsidies. It was contracts.
I think he might have used both words.
No. So he spoke very specifically about contracts because remember that.
I must get it up.
Okay, so the subsidies that used to go were not specific subsidies that went to Elon.
Yeah.
There were subsidies that went to the electric vehicle industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Which are basically removed as part of this bill. And remember that Elon supports that because he himself has been pushing for removal of those subsidies for the longest time because he says that they don't level the playing fields. What is true is that Trump said, maybe we should just end all of our contracts, at which point Elon then responded saying, fine, I'll start dismantling Dragon.
But my point I'm trying to make is that Elon reacts like a child and isn't thinking things through longer than 3 minutes away. And here's what I'm going to do to prove it. Donald Trump says the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts.
Yes.
That was the wording, subsidies and contracts. Okay. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it. Okay. So obviously that's an idle threat from Trump. He's not going to do that because he literally can't. He needs SpaceX, for example.
Yes.
America doesn't have a space program without that.
And at the same time, but remember, Elon cannot arbitrarily dismantle Dragon.
Okay, but Elon turns around.
Because he has a contract.
Okay, but in the moment, Elon turns around and goes, we're going to begin decommissioning Dragon, okay?
Sure.
And an hour and a half later, he turns around and goes, actually, no, we're going to put a pause on that whole decommissioning thing. Maybe because he got the information that or he knew it, or maybe someone told him, or whatever, or maybe he just decided it wasn't a good idea because it is dumb to do that anyway. But what I'm saying is I don't think Elon Musk thinks through a lot of these things. I'm not saying Donald Trump does either. I think some things are well thought through and are 4D chess and are a very intuitive. Donald Trump has a very intuitive understanding of politics, like almost no one has ever had, and that's why he's been so successful. But both of them are petulant and can be petulant, and both of them can be childish. And I just think, for the most part, Elon Musk was just being childish. I don't think he was like, "This is going to change Speaker Johnson."
So I'll differentiate, and I will say that Donald Trump has a propensity to be childish, and Elon Musk has a propensity to be childlike. And I'll use those words.
Right.
I use those words very advisedly because, so let's throw forward to where this is going to end up, okay? Because this, to my mind, really cuts to the heart of the matter. I'm saying that the way this thing is going to play itself out right now is that you are going to see the Senate sending further stuff for reconciliation back to Congress. You are going to see Congress acting on that, and you are going to see a version that eventually gets passed by the Senate that is at a much better threshold from the point of view of the stuff that Musk has been concerned about than is the current situation. So that's the way it's going to play out. Also, at the time that the bill finally gets signed off by the Senate, so you're going to have Trump's tax cuts in. You're going to have the border wall now being part of the budget. You're going to have the increased money for Tom Homan. You're going to have the increased money in terms of defense spending and all of that kind of stuff. But also at that point, you've then got a very public decoupling of all of Musk's business enterprises from the entire Trump establishment. You've once again got the ability for Tesla to be able to compete in the market without the sense that it's getting a Trump benefit or a Biden benefit or an Obama benefit back in the day. And it's kind of a leveling of the playing fields at a number of levels.
Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. It's fine, cool. I get that's your prediction.
Let's put money on it.
Okay, cool. I'll put lunch on it.
All right.
I'll buy you lunch if I'm wrong. You buy me lunch if you're wrong.
But we buy each other lunch anyway, John.
Fine. What do you want to put on account? What I think? Let me state what I think is going to happen.
Yes.
I think the bill, as it stands right now, is going to go to the Senate. I think they're going to pass it with 50 votes. JD might break the tie if there is one. I don't think there will be. And I think that'll be that.
I'm saying it will pass by 50 votes, but before it passes, it's going to be sent back.
I get that.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's not going to be sent back. I'm saying as it stands right now, the bill as it stands that Elon says he's very unhappy with, Rand Paul also says he's unhappy with, Thomas Massey also says he's unhappy with, so the libertarians are unhappy with it. I say that bill in its current form is going to pass. I'm not against what you're saying. I would like that to happen, assuming, you cut some negative stuff out and you make it a bit more streamlined. I think that would be great. I just don't see it happening. I think the bill's going to go through as it is now. I think that's going to be the end of that. I do think that Trump did try to de-escalate. The end of all of this is that I think Trump tried to de-escalate yesterday, posted a Truth Social thing saying, if Elon wants to sort of split away, that's fine. He should have done it months ago, etc. I think for those calling this I don't think anything will happen to Elon. So I think only good things will come to Elon from this, by the way. I'm not particularly critical of him for it. Let's get to the Epstein tweet. I think that was wrong, and that reflects poorly on Elon, not Trump. And I'll explain why. But other than that, I think only good things happen to Elon from this. Why? He's not involved in Trump's administration. People who hate Trump can now like Elon again. Okay, the Germans who stopped buying Tesla last month, last quarter, their sales dropped by 50% in Germany. So Germans can start buying Teslas again because, Mango Mussolini isn't friends with the guy who owns Tesla anymore. And all that stuff can still happen. Elon will still have his contracts with the government, SpaceX, Starlink, etc., because it is the only thing in the market, and he's the only guy who can do what he does. So I think this all works out fine for Elon, to be honest. And maybe they kiss and make up in a sort of more subtle way and in the future, and nobody really minds too much because Elon's not in depth and embedded. In terms of what this means for Donald Trump, I've seen people saying, well, it's done. It's done. His presidency's over.
Oh, no, rubbish. He's just getting started. Because like I said, going back to the points that I started this with, the single thing that could derail him at this point, and it's not going to be the border wall. It is not going to be the $1 trillion going for the Department of Defense. But if there was an increase on taxes that kicked in, that would have been the thing that derailed him.
Because the middle class is hurting badly in the United States.
That's what makes this thing so crucial at this point.
100%.
And what it's doing is that he's buying Trump time. Trump is buying time in order to codify that stuff. Because remember, yes, there's the midterms, but remember that the same discussion is going to take place next year. And at the point that they come to next year's passing a budget, Trump is in a significantly stronger position than he is at this point.
My point I wanted to make about, saying, well, Elon isn't friends with Trump anymore, and they've had this big
believe that's
falling.
The case.
Sure, I get that.
And it goes back to this earlier quip that I was making that
childish and childlike.
No. I was saying that men insult each other in public and they don't mean it. Women are nice to each other in public and they don't mean it.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly true.
And it's very much the case in this case. I'm not saying that right now they've written off a friendship. No.
Even if they weren't friends anymore, I feel like I need to remind everyone. Donald Trump came down a golden escalator in 2015. Elon Musk wasn't on his side. Neither was anyone in Silicon Valley. He won the presidency. He then had a whole presidency in which the entire mainstream media and all the tech bros were against him.
Yes.
They wanted Joe Biden.
Including Elon at that point.
Including Elon. Mm-hmm. They wanted Joe Biden to be the president in 2020. They got what they wanted. According to Elon, several years after that fact, he says the 2020 election was stolen. Not only Donald Trump, Elon says that. He's not yet recanted on that at all. Many other people have said the same thing. So Donald Trump comes down an escalator, gets lambasted for calling Mexicans rapists, which is not what he did, and has a terrible time getting to the presidency, still wins the presidency, has a successful presidency until COVID, then gets railroaded in the 2020 election, whether you think it was stolen or not. That whole COVID thing debacle was ridiculous. Has that happened to him? Then gets charged in 4 different trials, both state and federal. Okay, gets found guilty on 34 felony counts for an accounting error. The Democrats openly state to today that they want to send it to prison for this.
But you're going over stuff that we've discussed before. And you and I are completely in agreement with.
In all of this time, Elon Musk, this is the important part. In all of this time, in all of these things, Elon Musk is not a supporter of Donald Trump. Okay.
So
the point.
But you're paying too much attention to Elon in this particular context. You see, it only makes sense if you accept the view on the part of many people who say, "Oh, he would not have Trump would not have been elected not for Elon." No, that's not true.
Not true.
No, it's absolutely not true.
I think it's important to have this conversation, Kanthan. You forget what this podcast does.
Yeah, and I think making that particular point, we need to be very clear to people out there that Elon's support for Trump certainly helped him over the finish line, but was not crucial in terms of getting him over the finish line because the momentum that had been created by 4 years of the sheer buffoonery on the part of Biden and his auto pen had gotten the country to the point where, so in as much as, Elon may say he would not have made it without me, that's not true. And I think anyone who's looking at this objectively is going to realize this.
I was rehashing, but the point of rehashing is to say to you that until 11 months ago, Elon was not on the Trump train.
Yes.
And so would I prefer him on the Trump train? Yes, obviously. But if he's not on it, is it catastrophic?
But the question,
No.
when you talk about on the Trump train, again, we must be very clear in terms of what role he plays in terms of furthering the objectives of the Trump administration. And I'm very clearly from my side, is he in a better position to run interference in favor of the reasons why he supported Trump in the first place by being outside rather than being on the inside? I'm pretty clear that that's the case, because he is able to say things in his personal capacity as private citizen Musk than he was able to as an employee of government. And it really is kind of as simple as that when you get down to brass tacks. I want to say a couple of other things that people have not been paying attention to.
Sure.
Okay. And you've had this massive public attention now being turned onto the purported fallout that's been happening. So firstly, there was, Kaushik saying $150 billion has been wiped off from Tesla's stock price as a direct result of this. And yeah, but that's putting me back to where I was 3 years ago. But does it mean that Elon's worse off than he was? No, it doesn't. Okay, so that's the first point. Understand that the extent of emphasizing how bad this is for Elon doesn't actually apply. It isn't. So put that aside. The second thing to recognize is that while this is going on, over the past 48 hours, there have been massive strikes against Ukraine on the part of Russia. There have been massive troop movements. There have been massive amounts of territory that have been taken. There have been actual attacks on the capital, Kiev. And no one's talking about that.
Right.
Okay.
So I do want to get into this.
That's two things. Okay.
Yes.
I want to bring in a couple more things.
Okay.
Then there are unanimous decisions that got passed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay. Again, understand that in the context of what happens in the U.S., for unanimous decisions to play themselves out in the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'll tell you very briefly what they were. The one is that the government of Mexico tried to sue the entire gun industry in the United States, and they very specifically went after Smith & Wesson to hold them responsible for gang violence in Mexico, by saying that they would not be able to do this if they didn't have access to American armaments. And a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court strikes it down. Then you have another case where there was a woman who claims that she was fired from a job because she was a straight female. And that the company that she works for is an overwhelmingly gay environment, and she had gotten consistent rave reviews for her performance. But when she applied for a promotion, she got turned down, and more importantly, when she got turned down, she was then removed, and a gay man was put into her place. She sued for discrimination, went to eventually this way makes its way all to the Supreme Court. And again, unanimous decision that she has the right to be able to sue them because of the fact that it is discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation.
I think that was a very important ruling.
Yes,
I don't know if you want to get into the weeds on it, because I think it's quite relevant.
We can get into the weeds, but
Sure.
I also want to touch upon the third ruling. And the third ruling was a Catholic non-profit, which was being taxed by a state on the basis of the fact that they were not extending the concept of religious freedom through to them. And again, unanimous decision on the part of the Supreme Court that the same rules need to be applied to them as to others. And interestingly, by the way, in terms of the case of the straight woman who sued,
Yes.
my understanding is that opinion was written by Kanthan Brown Jackson, which again is a very interesting point to consider. So what I'm saying is that we heavily focused on all of the stuff that's going on right now around what's happening in the U.S. between Trump and Musk. And we're completely losing sight of the fact that there are seismic shifts happening within the country, other parts of the world.
Yes, I hear you.
And this is a distraction.
And let's get to them. But it's important to have the conversation we just had.
Yes.
And the reason it's important to have that conversation is because every single mainstream media outlet and even the alternative outlets today and for the rest of this weekend and probably for the next month, because you're going to have opinion pieces. That's how this works. First, it's the breaking news. Then it's everyone's short opinions on social media and the headline news. And then the headlines fade after about 4 or 5 days. And then it becomes opinion pieces. How Musk broke the Trump presidency, New York Times says, or something like that, right? And you're going to have lots of these. I'm waiting for the Atlantic article from Jeffrey Goldberg with some retarded take. The point is that we are here to say, all right, this is the situation that's going on. This is the narratives or the narrative that you're going to get from everywhere and everyone else. And this is our take on it. And that's why it's important for us to have that conversation. So I hope that was useful to those people who watch and listen. But I agree with you. I mean, one of the first things I posted last night about this, I didn't post much about it because, again, not enough information. What I did post about it is what else is happening while everyone else is focused on this. And there were quite a few things that have gone down.
What else did you pick up?
Well, there was a conversation that happened with Vladimir Putin.
And there was a conversation with Xi Jinping.
And there was a conversation with Xi Jinping, and there were some more sort of comments made around all of that with regards to what's happening in Iran. There was that. There was another court ruling. I can't actually remember it, but it was relevant. It'll come to me just now. There's the whole story around Palantir and what's going on with Palantir in terms of capturing U.S. citizen data, which I don't think is as nefarious as it sounds, but everyone's freaking out about that. But there's a whole bunch of stuff happening there. There are actually important things going on that are far more relevant than the debatable argument between two very rich, powerful men, the end of which doesn't actually change much. And so I thought that one Supreme Court ruling was very interesting. Essentially, it's turning around and going, you can discriminate against anyone. So you know how it gets said in this country, black people can't be racist. It's been said overseas as well, but it's been said here, you can't be racist because they tried to redefine racism. It's not just hating someone based on their race. It's, you have to have power, right?
Yes.
It's a power dynamic. So black people can't be racist because they've never had institutional power or something to that effect. In South Africa, it's a cuck argument because black people have had institutional power for 30 years. But the argument has always been that BE is not discriminatory. It's not racist because, you can't discriminate against white people. It's just redressing the inequalities in their society. So it's okay to do things you wouldn't do to black people, to white people, because it's justified. And basically what that ruling turns around and says is discrimination is discrimination. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. This should be obvious at this point, but unfortunately we've had to have court rulings on this now. It doesn't matter what color, creed, gender, yada, yada, etc. you are. Discrimination is discrimination, end of story. And there's never really a justification for sort of state-sanctioned discrimination. Okay, now discrimination is an interesting point. Thomas Sowell makes it in one of his books, I think it was 2 books ago, where he talks about how we discriminate all the time.
Damn, I'd love to have a conversation with that guy.
Oh,
jeez, but sorry, I
think he's like 94, 95 years old. Yeah. But and we discriminate all the time when you decide, what are we going to go have for lunch, Kanthan? That is, we're being discriminatory. If we choose the beef over the chicken, I mean, why do we hate chicken, Kanthan? Why? And we even make discriminatory decisions with regards to people all the time. You choose to go out with one friend, not another. You choose to, if you're in the dating pool, you choose to date one person, not another, etc. So we are discriminatory all the time. But in terms of this sort of state-sanctioned group discrimination, I thought that ruling was really, really important. And I hope that it's sort of the start of a turning point in some respects. I know we don't always follow Americans, but certainly if the Americans have gone that way and said, you're not allowed to do this, we can hope that will have some sort of trickle down.
Yeah, certainly the fact that it was a unanimous ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court. And, for the longest period, this is a court that's been fairly divided on significant issues. And yet these are matters of consequence that, have all been decided with a fair degree of unanimity on the part of all of the players. So, yeah, it's quite interesting times at that level. But so just to wrap up the thing around the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
So very crucially, the reason why I'm right and you're wrong,
Yes.
okay, is that the Senate has not yet set a date for a vote. And one of the reasons why they have not yet set a date for a vote is to give it enough time to send it back to Congress to make necessary changes. And only at that point will it finally come to pass. So,
Okay, so
if there were a vote scheduled already, I would agree with you completely,
If
John.
there are changes to the bill,
Yes.
if there are changes to the bill,
And
I'll be wrong.
I'm saying there will be changes to the bill. And that's what I'm putting money on.
So fine, and I'll stick to there won't be.
All right.
The bill will stay as it is.
All right.
Okay. Good. Do you want to give us the latest and greatest? I feel like we should call this the Ukraine report.
No, I don't think so. Look, I think, fundamentally, there were these 3 terrorist attacks that took place. And they were terrorist attacks in the sense that they were acts of sabotage that targeted very specifically civilian infrastructure and not military infrastructure. Okay, so it was 2 civilian bridges as well as the Kerch Bridge, which links mainland Russia to Crimea. And they were all carried out in exactly the same methodology with very specific explosive timers. And Putin's response has been to say, yes, we're going to continue having these discussions with Ukraine, but in the meanwhile, we are treating these as acts of terrorism, and we are noting that we cannot negotiate with terrorists effectively. And the results that you've seen have been the massive uptick in terms of incursions that have happened over the past 48 hours. And I'm, again, making the case that the end result is going to be Ukraine is going to become a landlocked country, potentially with Kiev as its capital, but potentially even losing Kiev as its capital. And let's just put Ukraine aside at that point. I think that we need to be clear that the situation between China and the U.S. has largely been resolved, and that there's a fair amount of equilibrium that has now been achieved around tariffs at the 30% level. There's going to be lots of back and forth that goes around on very specific things. But again, I think that that's something that's played itself out. Interesting election scenario in terms of Poland. Again, very different compared to what went down in Romania a short while ago, where you have a center-right candidate actually winning the elections.
Very interesting.
In Poland. The interesting thing from my perspective is that this person is a center-right candidate in pretty much the same way that you would say that Giorgia Meloni is a center-right candidate. So
European center-right.
Yeah, it's a European
There's no
center-right.
such thing as right in Europe.
Well, if you look at Fico in Czechoslovakia, or if you look at Orban in Hungary.
Yes,
and,
okay.
Yeah, so you do actually have...
Orban is right-wing. But bear in mind, once you get a right-wing, Orban isn't far-right. He's just right-wing. He's standard right-wing. If Orban was running in America, right, and he ran in Texas, he would be a lukewarm conservative.
Yes.
Okay. But if you look at how he's reported in Europe, how he's seen by Europeans, they view him as Mussolini.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the Europe scenario, that's pretty much the case. UK, there's not much to really speak of out there other than people are being sent to jail for extended periods for tweets. And my advice to people is that if you tweet inappropriate things, do not travel to the United Kingdom because you're likely to be arrested.
Yeah,
and spend time in jail while you're out there. So I think we can park all of that aside. Do we want to pull stuff back home?
I do, but I just want to talk, which we didn't get to, finally, about Elon Musk saying Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, and that's why the Epstein files haven't been released. And that was part of this whole alleged fight the two men had online. And I
got the
think
part. So I got the part where he said DJT is in the Epstein files. I didn't see where he said that's why they haven't been released. Did he actually say that?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up because I don't want to get it wrong, and I think for those people who might not have seen it, it might be useful to them.
I'm very clear that Trump is in the Epstein files, but he's in the Epstein files to the extent that he does not have anything.
Yeah, there's nothing on him.
There's nothing on him that he was investigated.
Well, I can tell you what we know is on him, but this is what Musk tweeted or X'd. Time to drop the really big bomb. Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT! Exclamation mark. So here's the thing. I don't believe that at all. And I said I was going to explain why this reflects poorly on Musk. Firstly, there's photos of Donald Trump with Epstein. There's photos of most people with Epstein.
But those are like decades old.
2004, something like that, 2004, 5. What happened is Trump actually found out about Epstein having been charged the first time around for inappropriate sort of sexual behavior with a minor. And he cut all ties at that point. It was about 2007 that happened. At the same time, 2006, I think it was, Trump was informed that Epstein, who was a member at Mar-a-Lago, had made inappropriate sort of moves on a teenage girl there. And he expelled him from his club.
Promptly, yes.
So basically, Trump severed all ties with Epstein in 2006-7, somewhere around there. We know that Donald Trump has had 10, 15 years of being vetted, the most vetted political person in the history of mankind.
Hence my saying that Trump will be in the Epstein files.
Yeah.
But he'll be in the Epstein files in the sense that he was invited to the island but did not go.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
also, the idea that they had to charge him for taking confidential documents he didn't really take because he was the president and he can declassify, or they had to go after him on Stormy Daniels or whatever.
Go back to our earlier 4D chess conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we talk about 3D chess and 4D chess. It's a chess game, guys. Can we just be real about this? And it just so happens that some players are several steps away. Does it not immediately make it easy for Trump to say, well, actually, I can prove that I'm not in any way involved, and here's the entirety of the files, and goes ahead and releases them?
So, yeah, I get that. I get that, and that's fine.
And I certainly hope that that's the case.
Here's why it looks bad. I want the files to be released as well, but I think they'll be mostly a nothing burger, by the way. But the point is that if you knew Donald Trump was in the Epstein files, you went and worked in his government and sat with him behind the Oval Office, the Resolute desk. So you were fine knowing he was a sexual abuser and was in the Epstein files as a sexual abuser.
Which is why the way I'm reading it is different to the way in which most people...
Alternatively...
And I'm saying it's giving an excuse now to Kash Patel to say...
It's fine. Still looks shitty for Musk because either you knew he was an abuser and you worked with him...
You of all people, since when do you care about it looks shitty for people?
Let me finish the second side of the point. Either you knew and you still worked with the guy and you were happy until you disagreed on something and then you outed him. But before that, you weren't going to say anything. Or you're lying now to make the other guy look bad in the argument you're having with him, which just makes you look like a disingenuous fool. So I just thought that was stupid on Musk's part. But Be that as it may.
So again, let's see how that particular thing plays itself out. And but again, in the context of what's happening in the rest of the world right now, I think that's probably the least significant thing that's going to emerge from this entire brouhaha that we have.
Yeah, fine. Bring it home.
Bringing stuff back home, well, all of the political parties seem to be in a bit of a mess right now. I mean, you've had, Steenhuisen standing before a racist body and talking about inclusive growth. You've had our president, for the first time, publicly speaking out against one of his ministers.
Yeah.
Which again is somewhat unprecedented. A crossover on the MK aisles. You've had Floyd Shivambu being redeployed to Parliament.
I find that a bit interesting. I think that because everyone looks at that and mocks Floyd because he was Secretary General of the party and they've removed him as Secretary General and now they've put him in Parliament just as a parliamentarian. And everyone goes, Floyd, you got removed and, you kind of detonated your sort of career at the EFF and went to the MK. Now the MK's relegated you essentially. And I look at that and go, no, not really. I mean, yeah, okay, he's not Sec Gen anymore. And maybe he's lost a little bit of power in that party. I saw some people writing off MK as a result of all of this. They turned around and said, well, MK is also done for now. And I sort of looked at it and went, well, no, as long as people think that Jacob Zuma is a solution, they like what he says, they like what he stands for, people are going to vote for that party. The same goes for Julius Malema.
But let's also take the view that in terms of Floyd now being in Parliament, he's certainly a far more useful point of presence for MK in Parliament.
Yes, agreed.
Where he actually gets to speak on a public platform with regularity and people are forced to report on him. And at that level, I actually think...
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that it's actually better for
Couldn't
him.
agree more. I mean, Floyd is a smart political operative.
Yeah.
He knows how the system works and he knows what to say to drive certain issues. And frankly, MK doesn't have that.
Yes.
MK's got the figurehead, as I mentioned. It's Jacob Zuma. I think one thing that is true is if Jacob Zuma dies, MK collapses, currently, at least in its current state. Then it's a nothing party and nobody votes for it. But if Floyd can become a loud voice within that party driving certain issues, then he could actually become probably the number 2 in that party.
Well, you see, you've had this cuck decision on the part of the courts that said that Hlophe cannot be considered for being part of the Judicial Services Commission. It's a terrible decision. It's a terrible decision for the very simple reason that whenever you pass any laws of that sort, imagine any particular law in the hands of the person who will do the worst possible thing with it. And if you can systematically go through a process of excluding people, that, to my mind, is doing, it's precisely undermining the rights of voters to be able to put people in to represent them, no matter how reprehensible one might think of it. But now consider that the likely person to then be representing MK on those commissions is going to be Floyd. From my perspective, that's going to be very much the case. And he's going to be taking his cues in terms of what to say from Hlophe, who is still going to be in Parliament, and he's still the leader of the opposition in Parliament from his perspective. Yeah, so there's that. And, so the shenanigans continue. I just want to say that I'm very pleased that our DA Minister of Communication and... at least he's removed CETA from being the sole provider of telecoms to all of the state institutions, which at very least means that we can now walk into Home Affairs and not have to get, the system is down.
Maybe. Yeah. Yes, maybe. But yes, the potential is there.
It's removing that excuse.
Yeah. I mean, I've found him to be very underwhelming.
Oh, no, he's completely underwhelming. But I'm just trying. I'm looking
to find the silver lining.
I'm looking for silver linings here, John.
Sure.
And frankly, I think that
the silver lining is that the DA members and ministers, as you would expect them to be, are far less stupid and far less completely
I don't know.
damaging
No, I don't know.
in general.
I don't know about the far less stupid. I mean, if I have to draw a comparison between our Minister of Electricity and our Minister of Agriculture, I'd certainly say that our Minister of Agriculture...
Yeah, but you did pick the highest IQ member of the entire ANC NEC. I mean, really, Kgosiento Ramokgopa is a smart guy.
Yes,
properly,
yeah,
he's actually a smart guy.
Yeah, but to my point, I think that if you average out the rest of them, then yes, the DA probably has a slight edge. But
I think, for example, we've spoken about some of these people, but if you go look in mainstream media, go look for the last time Siviwe Graruba was really there was a big thing in the news. Like she was really championing something. And, Gwede Mantashe is a moron. He's probably allegedly an alcoholic. I think he's not particularly bright, my personal opinion. And he is constantly out there doing stuff, saying stuff, pushing stuff, driving stuff. And, for the ANC, it's all bad stuff. It's all terrible. Where's Gwaruba doing that? Where's she? Virtually unheard of, right? She'll tell you she's doing stuff. I'm sure we'll have dear acolytes coming and telling you and I, you were wrong on the show. She's really trying hard in the background, and I don't give a shit. Dion George, what is he doing other than loving everything Bill Gates says? Other than that, but where's his actual, even if he loves the Bill Gates stuff, where's it happening? So the DA guys are under the radar, maybe getting stuff done, maybe not. Leon Schreiber, a little bit of good stuff, a little bit of bad stuff. It's just it's just very ineffectual, it feels like. And even when Solly does something in that communications ministry, it's just finally, dude. But the least you could do, the absolute least you could do. I mean, the whole Starling thing was he sort of drafted a draft regulation and said we should probably look at maybe making these things somewhat part of our policy. What does everybody else think? He didn't turn around and say, I'm the minister, this is the new rule. He could have just gazetted things. Aaron Motsoaledi just gazettes things whenever he likes. Oh, you can't have weed anymore. That's it, it's done. There was no discussion about that. He gazetted it. Okay, he had to withdraw it. He tried, he made the effort. Where are the DA guys just gazetting stuff? Doesn't happen, right? And it's just so I don't want to knock on the DA because, whenever I knock on the DA, people turn around and go, yeah, but Jonathan, have you seen the ANC?
John, I know you're usually the person who's knocking on the DA and I'm usually cutting them some slack. But, frankly, I just found it so friggin' distasteful, Steenhuisen standing up before the Black Business Council and kowtowing to them and talking about their contributions to inclusive growth. It was vomit-inducing.
Yeah, I mean, that just shouldn't be a place that the leader of what was the official opposition and the leader of what claims to be the Liberal Party in the original sense of that word, the Liberal Party in this country would even go to a gathering like that. It just, if you had invited John or Helen or Musi or whatever.
I think we should take a view in terms of John. From now on, let's just refer to him as Corporate 2.0. I think that's a good analogy to draw.
Yeah, I saw that some people wanted to go down that route.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be honest in my ignorance here in that I don't remember enough about Martinus van Schalkwyk. I know what he did, and I remember the whole NNP and the sort of dilution into the ANC, etc. But I don't remember enough about how hilarious, I guess, that was, and how catastrophic that was for his party. And I guess you were very involved in all that.
I was.
You were right in the mix.
I was very involved, and I remember a cartoon from the era where there was a picture of Martinus van Schalkwyk clutching his hands over his crotch. And a towering Patricia DeLille in dominatrix gear standing over him, looking at him and saying, "I've never seen one that small before." and
when Zapiro was still good, or what?
No, it wasn't Zapiro. It was another cartoonist, and the tag was Martinez gets an iding, because of course at the time Patricia was running Independent Democrats.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. That's some really good political satire. I think the problem with the DA and the reason for the bashing sometimes is just disappointment. I think that's what it is. If I look back to when they went into government, there were a lot of people saying, well, this is a betrayal, and people like Rob Dugan saying things like this was always the plan. The ANC and the DA are basically one, and they're the same. They're the same thing, and they want the same thing. The only thing is that the DA are better bureaucrats and that kind of stuff. And I wanted to give them a chance, and I felt that what they were saying at the time, I listened to that and I said, all right, let's see if that works out. Which was, we know how to do things properly. So we're not going to be able to control everything in the GNU, but the stuff we control, we're going to do the DA way. So those areas will look like Cape Town. That was the pitch. And
who do you think is going to be their presidential candidate next year? Not next year. Sorry, in 4 years' time.
Yeah. So I get a lot of pushback on this whenever I raise DA sort of leadership stuff. A lot of people seem very upset to even discuss it. So some people get very cross that why won't it just be John? Some people seem very convinced that John will just serve again, which he's allowed to do.
Because the man's an idiot. And I'll challenge him to a debate on any platform.
Oh, yeah. I think open invitation, by the way, to any person from the DA of suitable stature. We don't just take any local councillor, but anyone of suitable stature, welcome to come onto this platform at any time to have a discussion, debate, whatever, either with just
Which
me
is not
or
to say
just
that we're
Kanthan
changing
or
the
both of
format
us.
at this point.
No, but for that, I would absolutely.
For that, we definitely do a special show.
So some people seem convinced it'll be John. I'm pretty sure it won't be. I think he's done too much damage to himself. I think he knows that. His behavior shows that he seems to know that. So
hence my saying that he's probably going to end up joining the ANC and being finally a white member of...
He'll either join the ANC, or in the role he's taken on now, he will make certain contacts and networks, and you will see John end up as chairman of Agri-SA, or you will see John in a big business role after the fact or something. He's going to make contacts, and he's going to try solidify himself, because after this he's a bit screwed, right? Because what are his actual skills? His skills are that he's a politician. He's not a bad orator, if you remember to when he was chief whip in Parliament. And those are his big skills. But other than that, where is he going to fit in? How does he fit in at one of the big banks?
So let's agree that it's not going to be John.
It's not going to be John.
Yeah. So
I've floated what I think is possible based on some DA people I've spoken to, and also reading the tea leaves a little bit. Obviously, this can change.
Remind us.
So you're looking at people like Flip, and now you're making me go blank. I put this out yesterday. So you've got obviously Jordan Hill-Lewis.
Not Ryan Coetzee?
So we can get to Ryan Coetzee. You've got Jordan Hill-Lewis, who I think is probably a front runner. And the reason why I think Jordan is a front runner is because obviously he's got the governing track record in Cape Town. He's also got a bit of a base. So you need delegates essentially to support you. So he's got that base, but he comes with Helen Zille's support. I think Helen Zille is going to drop John like a hot potato. And I think Jordan Hill will be the next guy she picks up. And she will have Helen's support. And in having Helen's support, he will probably have more than 50% support of the party. Probably. So that's Jordan is one potential option. Some people have mentioned that Helen herself is an option. I don't think she wants to get back into the mix. I think that would be an incredibly...
I think she enjoys being a grandmother. She enjoys spending time with her grandkids. And
she enjoys the role she currently plays.
The fact is she's earned it.
She enjoys the role she currently plays in the party, which is, sort of this kingmaker and a lot of power behind the snes. But
on the assumption that the other players, so...
So the other players are Malatsi, who is high in the ranks, essentially. Has now got the Gauteng track record. Has been a candidate for the DA again and again and again. Has that base of support. So if he goes to a national sort of convention of the DA and needs people to vote for him, you may very well find that a lot of people from the Gauteng side of things and the Northwest and in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, you may be able to draw that in a similar way to how Didi Mabuza did that with regards to the ANC in the elective conference time before last. And then Alan Winde. Alan Winde is in the issue-in. He's got.
You really think he's a shoo-in?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Again, a Western Cape base, a lot of support within the party. He's quite liked and admired within the party. Clearly, nobody there remembers what happened 5 years ago. But the other thing is that Alan comes with his own funding. So there is a large amount of funding that comes into the DA, which is Alan's funding. It's coming from his donors, essentially. And they're donors that would not fund Helen.
Interesting.
Alan brings them to the table. And money talks. And so I'd be surprised to at least not see him in the mix. Now, there's a lot of other people that, I put this out there, and there's a lot of other people that have been mentioned. There's some dark horses. I wish we had a dark knight. So you've got the likes of Simmers. I don't know much about the guy, but essentially he's the leader in the Western Cape. You've got Whitfield. I think it's Andrew. He's from the Eastern Cape. He's also quite well liked. He's quite well regarded in terms of having increased vote share in otherwise low polling DA areas. So he's done quite well to bring new voters to the party. So he may be a shoo-in. And then you've got, I said Gwen and Gwenya, because I don't think she's ever really out of the fray. I think Gwen would claim she is. But I truly believe if they wanted to bring her back, and particularly if the DA, and this is no insult to Gwen, because I think it's irrelevant that she's a black woman, but if they wanted to window dress, then, they're going to look for a black person, and Gwen's name's got to be on that list, and certainly as a strong candidate.
They did try that
and
once
again,
before.
not because of because of her race at all.
Well,
gender.
To that point, today is when we're recording this, it's Musi Mamani's 45th birthday, and
happy birthday, Musi! Why don't you go shut down a school for a virus?
Yeah, and to that point, we saw how well that ended up. You didn't mention Leon Schreiber at all.
Okay, so then there's other people that I don't think are in the running. Leon Schreiber, yeah. I don't think Leon Schreiber's in the running. I've met Leon, spent a little bit of time with Leon. He's a competent guy. He's relatively knowledgeable. He's not a leader. He just doesn't have the gravitas to occupy that position. Someone I think does have the gravitas to occupy that position is Cilliers Brink. I don't think he has the support yet to get there. Pappas has been mentioned as well. He's got the same problem. And look, personally, if I was a strategist for any of these people, I would tell them something very simple. Politics is about timing. And if I look at someone like Cilliers or Chris Pappas.
Well, I mean, the only reason why Steenhuisen is where he is because of Mamane.
That's right. And I think John's timing was excellent there, because John would never have been the leader if he had waited.
Yes.
So he took the opportunity to become the leader when he could become the leader. But I think both Cilliers and Chris should sit this out and wait, get more experience, solidify your network in the party, build support over 5 to 10 years from now at least, solidify the things you've done. Pappas needs to be the kind of guy who moves from a small municipality into a bigger municipality or into a premiership. That's the kind of trajectory that guy should have.
The only premiership that's up for the DA is the premiership of
The Western Cape.
Of the Western Cape. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because,
that may be true, and he can potentially go to Parliament and be effective there. I mean, that's how John made a name for himself. I think those guys don't have a real chance of winning, but I do think they've got a potential chance of winning some point in the future.
But
And
you see, the problem
they're
that I
strong.
have is that none of the people you mentioned are going to fill a stadium.
None of them are going to fill a stadium, and I will say something worse, which is that none of them are going to, when the rubber hits the road, none of them are going to do classically liberal things.
Yes.
And that's the real worry for me. You know, when the rubber hits the road, if you put any of those oaks in the presidency and they get a telephone call from the funders and they say, this Ramon Caberna guy, you need to fire him, none of them are going to say, no, fuck off. If you put any of them in the Department of whatever, and they get to decide basic education, and they get to decide on the bathrooms at schools, none of them are going to say there'll be boys' bathrooms and girls' bathrooms. We're not doing unisex. We're not doing transgender. We're not doing shit. None of them are going to have the fortitude to say that. Put them into the health ministry. None of them are going to say none of them are going to not start the sentence of NHR with, we understand the need for quality access to healthcare for everyone. None of them are just going to turn around and go, no, this is bullshit. We do not steal from people to give other people things. We want everyone to be able to get the healthcare they can afford. That's what we're going to work towards. End. So that's the problem. The DA doesn't have anyone who talks like that. They don't have anyone who sounds like that. I'm not sure they can, because the party doesn't allow people to have that ideology anymore. It's not allowed. They had a guy literally employed in an office somewhere who, if his name wasn't what his name is, if he hadn't have done a couple of podcasts with yours truly and written some controversial tweets on a social media app, and I'm not trying to diminish you at all, Ramon, but the truth is, if he hadn't have done those things, you wouldn't even know his name, because you don't know the names of any of the chiefs of staff for any of the other people, the ministers involved, and you don't care. And the DA couldn't even stand behind that guy and the principle of free speech and freedom of expression. So,
although admittedly in this particular case, and I'll distinguish between Roman's case and that of Ronaldo House.
Yeah, there's another good example.
Yeah, and in Roman's case, I'm very clear that this is entirely on Steenhuisen, as opposed to
the worrying thing is that in Ramon's case, it's on Steenhuisen and probably Tony Leon and probably Ryan Coetzee, okay? Because
I don't get it in terms of Tony Leon, though. I mean, why?
Tony Leon's very much still involved there, and they all.
No, but why would Tony
He's
have
the
anything?
older statesman in the party.
Yeah, but why would Tony have anything against Ramon?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but it's clear in his new book that he does have something against Ramon. In fact, he incorrectly and falsely labeled Ramon a shock jock. Ramon has never been a disc jockey in his life. I'm not sure he's ever actually been on live radio. And he certainly hasn't been spinning tracks at the club. So what Tony Leon thinks he knows about Ramon is clearly false, or at least what he wrote in his book about the guy.
I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that Tony Leon has a book. Has it made the New York Times bestseller list?
No, I don't think it's made the South African bestseller list. But the worrying point that you make is that, yes, Steenhuisen got rid of Ramon. The DA internally, all of their FedEx, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of strings being pulled.
They got rid of Ghost.
They got rid of Ghost.
Yes.
So not only is the leader, if you change the leader, you don't change the FedEx. The whole thing is rotten. And that's really the worry with that party. Now, salvageable? Absolutely. But there has to be some real change there and
so
some real
you need to have a
introspection.
fundamental change at the level of the FedEx. And but again, who? There's...
Well, Kanthan, I'm going to say something I've been thinking about lately, which is that we need a conservative party. Now, I'm not saying we need you to bring a conservative party, but you did try. I think, in personal opinion, brilliant branding. Terrible name. So, unfortunately, just because capitalism was always going to be a debated point in this country, and you need, we don't do real names in this country. Democratic Alliance, where are you democratic? Where is the alliance? With who? I know you joined a whole bunch of parties years back, but honestly, the African National Congress. What? Okay, 100 years ago, these things, they don't actually mean anything. They have no real meaning in the present day. So you need to call it something saccharine. It needs to be the Conservative Party, or something like that, where you can sell it to everyone and go.
Except we historically had a Conservative Party, and this was Andries Triane's party when he split from the National Party.
Could you call yourself the Conservative Party, or is it still not allowed?
I don't know.
An interesting question.
It's an interesting question. But again, I don't think it's a question of the name, really, when you get down to brass tacks. It's a question of having, and, literally we need the likes of a Bukele who's going to come forward on a single issue. And the single issue is going to be, I am going to sort out crime and policing. Nothing else. I'm just going to sort out crime and policing. And I'm going to end up tossing all of these guys in jail with no possibility of parole.
Yeah.
Any corrupt police officer is going to go to jail for life under the same circumstances. And I'm going to respect the castle doctrine, which means that anyone has the right to defend their property. And I'm convinced that this person will walk it. But you need to identify a person who has the ability to stand on that platform and then rally enough people around this person to then ensure that that person gets all the way to the union buildings.
Yeah, I just, we aren't there yet.
And we don't have, I haven't come across that person yet. I know that a lot of people think that Gayton can play that role. No, Gayton is a loose cannon.
It's not only that. It's not only that he's a loose cannon. I think loose cannon's fine. Trump's a loose cannon.
No, Trump's very focused. I think people consider Trump as a loose cannon. No, he's been very focused on the things that he's always wanted to achieve.
Maybe with different definitions of loose cannon. But I think where Gayton loses it for me is, it's fine to be sort of loud and proud about the issues and controversial and push things and unpopular when you need to be unpopular, and who cares? To hell with it. Where the issue for me comes with him is the minute he got the opportunity to sort of kiss the ANC's ass.
He did.
And every time he has had the opportunity, he's had it multiple times. He had it at municipal levels as well. And then obviously at the national level, he did. And unnecessarily, he didn't need to go as far as he did, and as far as he has gone. You look at what happened in the Oval Office. For no reason, Gayton turns around and supports Cyril. He could have said nothing. He could have turned around and said Cyril did a shit job, right? He could have, any number of things he could have done. He wouldn't have lost his ministerial post over that. Gayton's not the guy. And you're right, we don't have the guy yet. But I don't think we have the party structure either. And that's unfortunate.
We're not going to have the party structures because, these things are expensive. And it's really difficult for people within South Africa to put their money behind someone who's opposed to the current government, because it then means that the might of the state can then be called against you. And it's a really difficult position, for many people to be in. And, I'll give you an example, okay? And it's not because he's a friend of mine. I think that Michael Jordan would make a phenomenal chief executive for the country.
Probably, yes.
Okay, and he's not going to be in a position to ever do that simply because of the fact that the businesses that he currently runs, place so firmly in a position where the state can bring its might down upon him at a moment's notice. So he's in banking, he's in telecommunications, and these are spaces where, the state has the ability to make or break you. And there are so many people in this country who are highly competent, who would be very reluctant to put their hands up for that type of leadership position, simply because of that fact that there's too much at stake that they could end up losing. You need to pretty much be someone who has so much money that you can actually afford to say, I'm just going to go it my own way. And I'm still convinced, by the way, that Patrice is going to be the person that the ANC eventually ends up putting forward.
Wow. Okay, cool. That's interesting. You think Patrice is going to end up as the next president of the ANC and therefore the president of the country?
I think that there's a move right now to steer him in that direction in exactly the same way as there was a move to steer Ramaphosa in that direction prior to Ramaphosa.
Are we doing this thing again where we go the competent black chief executive? Is that what we're doing?
I think that's exactly the narrative that's going to be spun.
God, I'm so tired of this nonsense. And no, you know, fine, whatever. I mean, again, I don't really care who ends up in that position if they actually are any good at what they do, and most importantly, if they have no ideology. So if they're a whatever works type of person, which would be better for this country right now than what we have, or if they're an ideology person that isn't tended towards communism, which unfortunately is what Cyril is. And I just don't see Patrice breaking that mold, unfortunately.
No, I don't either.
Yeah. All right. On that depressing note, the DA with some not great options.
John, in the words of your tribe, you still have your health.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think we can call it there.
We could call it there. Yeah.
I hope we've been nice and punctual to the issue this time, because this podcast, I'm going to try to get it up by tomorrow. That'll be Saturday. So it'll be within 48 hours of the Trump-Elon fallout. And hopefully you've enjoyed our perspective on that, because that took a lot of the podcast. And then the rest of the rubbish we had to say. All right. I'll catch you next time.
All right. Cheers.
Don't forget, before we go, like, subscribe, comment, share, all those things. Apparently the algorithm cares. Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.